how do you prevent a government from becoming to authoritarianism if they have moved even an inch away from their role of just protecting individual liberties?
Well, this exact argument, the question that you asked and the argument between the two sides is almost exactly the argument between the Federalists and the Jeffersonians at the American founding. Because the Jeffersonians, their position is, it's almost exactly what you just said, that government is inherently, it's just inherently bad, which is like, I mean, that there is an argument there. It's not like a crazy thing to say, but the result of this argument is you try to keep all power as much as possible at the local level, and if not, then at the state level, and if not, then you try to keep all power away from any kind of central government, and that's basically what the Jeffersonians were saying. Jefferson himself didn't even want a national constitution. He said, we can meet once every 20 years and work out what the best arrangements are. And against that argument, there was a party that was basically the National Conservative Party. I mean, its name was the Federalist Party, but in this book, I argue that the Federalists are the National Conservatives at the American founding. That's George Washington, John Jay, John Adams, Hamilton, and also this guy that nobody ever talks about, Gouverneur Morris, who is this thinker and political theorist who is actually the guy who drafted the American Constitution. So he's he's like the Jefferson of the Constitution. He's like the draftsman of it. And if you go back and you look at who these people are and what they wanted, first of all, they thought that the Constitution of 1777, which we usually call the Articles of the Confederation, there was a Constitution before the American. There's a first Constitution, and that first Constitution was weak. What do I mean by weak? I mean that it departed from the English Constitution in all these radical ways, having a plural executive, there was no one president or king. There was everybody was supposed to make decisions together, and as a consequence, they couldn't raise armies. They couldn't pay those armies. They couldn't even sign a peace treaty and enforce the terms of the treaty on the states, because they had gone so far in the extreme of worrying about like individual and local liberties that they couldn't even defend themselves. And people don't remember this, that when George Washington had to move his army down to Yorktown to try to win the war, like the French are showing up and he needs to move his army, they didn't have any funds. They collected private donations so that they could pay to move the army. I mean, you have to understand how totally crazy this is. And so Washington came out of the American Revolution saying, this is hopeless. Our country, we have no future this way. The only way we have a future is if we have a central government that's powerful enough to do things that are for the common good, that are for creating a more perfect union, that are for the common defense, and for the general welfare. I mean, these are the expressions that Washington and his party wrote into the American Constitution. And of course, it includes the blessings of liberty. But the blessings of liberty, I argue in this book, the blessings of liberty is one out of 7 principles that Washington and his party wrote into the preamble of the American Constitution. And the reality of politics is, and I'm sorry if this is not simple enough for people, but the reality of politics in the real world is, if you go too far in the direction of just rights, just individual liberties, your country collapses because you can't keep it going. And if you go too far in the direction of the central government will make decisions about everything, then you start damaging people's liberties and you start moving towards tyranny. Both of those arguments are true. So unfortunately, I'm asking people to sort of be realistic about this. Since both arguments are true at the extremes, the actual answer, as the Federalists knew, the actual answer is is in the middle, a strong central government with a distribution of powers under federalism. That was their answer. But I think too many conservatives have in the last generation have just forgotten that the Federalists were the national conservatives, and they're the ones who wrote the Constitution. And they think, oh, you know, Jefferson founded our country, and we don't need anything but individual liberty.